Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into something that goes way beyond the usual weight loss chat. We're not just talking about medication, but a really profound shift in understanding hunger itself. And we're doing that through the lens of Dan Hollis's insights.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to unpack how a tool like semaglutide, often just seen for its physical side, can actually kickstart some much deeper emotional work, maybe even identity stuff. It's definitely more than just the scale.
Absolutely. And what's really fascinating is what happens when those constant physical cravings start to quiet down, that silence. It's unexpected for many, and it creates this really valuable space for the deeper questions to finally come up. It's an opportunity, honestly, that many people didn't even realize could exist for them.
That's a really interesting way to put it. So okay, let's start there then. What is emotional hunger exactly? How is it different from, the physical kind, that stomach growl we all know? And how does Dan Hollis help us see that difference, especially when we might be getting our own signals mixed up?
Yeah, Dan Hollis frames it really well, I think. He says, emotional hunger sounds like a craving, but it's actually a question, a need asking to be seen. Which is powerful, right? Because it shifts things. It's not about something you shouldn't do, some deficit. It's more like, okay, what's my system actually trying to tell me here?
And that makes so much sense when you hear it like
Yeah.
that. We've all done it, haven't we?
Yeah.
Reaching for, I don't know, cookies when we're just
Oh, yeah.
wiped out or lonely or maybe just totally overwhelmed. We grab food, but maybe what we really need is connection or comfort or just a minute of quiet, So how does Dan help people start to sort of decode those signals, those questions?
Well, what's really great about his perspective is there's no shame involved. He just names it. He calls it wisdom misdirected. So instead of you're bad for doing that, it's more of an invitation like, why am I reaching for this right now? What's the real need underneath the surge? And that little shift from, punishment to curiosity, that's huge. It opens things up.
Right, that question, what am I really hungry for? It must become so much clearer when all that background noise of cravings finally dials down. And I guess that's where something like semaglutide, Ozempic or Wegovy comes into play. It doesn't just affect weight, it actually changes that internal noise level. For listeners maybe just hearing about it, can you briefly explain how this kind of drug, this GLP-1 agonist, creates that quiet Dan talks about?
Sure. So semaglutide, it's a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Basically, it mimics a hormone our gut naturally makes. This hormone does a couple of key things. It slows down how fast your stomach empties, so you feel fuller longer. And crucially, it also works on the appetite centers in your brain. So it's not just about physical fullness. It's actually dampening those constant hunger signals, those cravings. And that's how it creates that internal silence we're talking about. It turns down the volume on the biological drive for food.
Okay, so it's not like the solution in itself.
No.
But maybe it's the signal, or like Dan says, the silence that lets you find one. It's not the answer, but it gives you the breathing room to find your answer. He calls it the window, right? Or a biological pause.
Exactly.
And that lets you finally ask, okay, what am I actually hungry for? It's like clarity coming from a biological shift.
And it really is a profound shift. Dan, he shared his own experience starting it. He said the thing that surprised him most was just the quiet. He said something like, I didn't realize how loud food was in my life until the cravings were gone. The silence was unsettling and strangely beautiful. I mean, imagine decades of that constant food chatter just muted. That's a huge internal change to navigate.
Wow. Unsettling and strangely beautiful. That really paints a picture. And it brings up this idea you mentioned, this emotional scaffolding. Like if you've always used, say, ice cream after a bad day or scrolling delivery apps when you feel alone, those aren't just food choices. They're like these invisible supports for an emotional need. So when semaglutide quiets those specific urges, it's like, poof, the supports are gone. And you're left feeling kind of raw, maybe exposed to whatever was underneath. What happens if that part isn't dealt with?
Well, that's exactly why the emotional support piece is non-negotiable for lasting change. Dan sees people relapse, right? But often it's not because the medication stopped working. It's because, as he puts it, no one helped them rebuild the emotional framework that food used to support.
Yeah.
Without that new framework, once the biological quiet lessens, or if they stop the medication, they naturally go back to the old coping ways.
That makes so much sense. Because for so many people, food was more than fuel. It was comfort, definitely. Sometimes control. Maybe even part of their identity, So when that relationship changes so drastically, it probably does feel like losing a friend or like a core part of your routine is just gone. It seems totally normal then to feel anxious or, I don't know, a bit weird. as those cravings fade, you're basically in new territory without your old map.
Exactly. And that's where Dan Hollis really differentiates his whole approach. He has this great line, most programs hand you a syringe and wish you luck. I hand you a map. It really highlights that the medication, the tool, it's just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle.
A map, not just a syringe. I like that. It definitely reframes things. So, okay, can you unpack that a bit more? What makes his map different from, say, typical weight loss advice? What are the key parts?
Well, a big part is shifting the mindset. It's moving away from chasing perfection, which is impossible anyway, towards mastering your own unique patterns. Because life happens, right? There's going to be cake at a birthday party or a really stressful day at work. And if your whole system collapses because of one slice of cake, spiraling into shame and restriction, then you haven't actually learned flexibility. So it's about learning how to handle those moments without completely getting, derailed.
Right? Building resilience into the process, not just aiming for some perfect streak.
Exactly. And then there's pacing over speed. Look, fast weight loss sounds great. It's really seductive. But often it triggers metabolic slowdowns. Your body basically thinks, uh-oh, famine, and slams the brakes on, holding on to energy for dear life. So Dan's approach paces the weight loss. It's about signaling safety to your biology, making sure you can actually finish the race, not just have a fast start and then stall out. It's about sustainable change.
That biological signaling piece sounds really key for the long haul. What else is on this map he provides?
A really clear off-ramp strategy. This is critical. Dan stresses he never starts someone on semaglutide without figuring out the exit plan first. Because, as he says, if you don't have a strategy, the biology takes over. Meaning, those original cravings. They will come back eventually, to some degree. And if you haven't built new ways to manage them and the underlying emotional stuff, the weight often comes back too.
Okay, so it's positioned as a temporary tool used strategically within a larger plan. Got it. And what about managing the cravings while you're using it or as you taper off?
He teaches people to observe, not obey their cravings. It's about learning to decode them, to figure out, okay, what does this really mean? Is it actual physical hunger, or is it maybe thirst? Or boredom, or just a habit linked to like 3 p.m. every day. It's becoming a detective of your own internal world instead of just automatically reacting to every single signal, separating true hunger from what he calls signal confusion.
Observing, not obeying. So this whole framework, this map, it really creates the time and the mental space needed to reflect, to kind of reset your whole relationship with food and fundamentally rewire how you respond to those emotional triggers. The physical quiet becomes like a lab for mental change.
Exactly. And that leads right into what Dan sees as the real core work, identity. He has this deep insight that emotional hunger is often a symptom of identity disconnection. Like, when we lose touch with who we really are or what truly matters to us, food can kind of step in as a substitute. It fills a void that isn't really about food at all.
Wow, okay. That really does reframe the whole journey, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if it's not just about losing weight, what's the actual goal then, according to Dan?
The real goal is becoming the kind of person who doesn't need weight loss as a project anymore. And that, he says, takes identity work, not just dieting. It's about moving beyond that constant battle footing with food, moving towards a place where your choices just naturally line up with who you are and who you're becoming.
And he has that powerful line, too. You don't hold on to weight loss with discipline. You hold on to it with alignment. What does he mean by alignment there? Can you unpack that?
Yeah, alignment in this sense, it means replacing the story you tell yourself, not just the snack you eat. It's recognizing that if your internal narrative is always, I struggle with food, I always fail, that story itself pulls you back. But if you start to build a new identity, seeing yourself as someone who, values their well-being, listens to their body, has actual tools for stress, then your choices start to naturally align with that identity. It's about internal coherence, not just willpower.
So if the scale isn't the be-all and end-all, how does Dan measure success in his approach?
He's really clear on this. He says success is measured not by the number on the scale, but by how many coping mechanisms we've replaced with real tools. And then he adds, weight loss is a side effect of clarity. The number dropping becomes a result, an indicator maybe, but not the primary goal itself.
Okay. But let's be real for a second. A lot of people listening might be thinking, yeah, this sounds nice, but what if I failed at literally everything before this? I've tried it all. That fear is real.
Oh, absolutely. And Dan's response to that is actually really empowering, I think. He says, good. He says, that means you've tested what doesn't work. Now let's build what does, with tools that match your biology, not shame your behavior. And he often adds that, failure is only failure if you don't learn anything from it. It's about taking the lessons from past attempts, recognizing that maybe those diets didn't fail you, they just weren't the right approach for your specific biology or your emotional needs.
And what about that feeling some people have, that they've just completely lost control around food? That seems to be a common reason for seeking out medication.
Yeah, and he gently reframes that too. He clarifies, you didn't lose control, you lost connection. Connection to your hunger cues, connection maybe to your purpose, or just connection to yourself. He really sees that intense, overwhelming feeling around food is often stemming from that deeper disconnection. And the work is about rebuilding those connections.
Okay, and then there's the big one. The idea that using semaglutide is somehow cheating,
Yeah.
that comes up a lot. How does Dan address that?
He tackles that head on. He says, if your body's biochemistry is rigged against you, using science to unrig it isn't cheating, it's adapting. And then he adds, the real cheat is pretending willpower was enough all along. Especially now that we understand so much more about how hormones and gut health and brain chemistry drive cravings, often completely below our conscious awareness. Using a tool to help regulate that biological system isn't a moral failing, it's just, well, it's leveling the playing field, as he puts it. It's adapting.
Adapting, not cheating. I also found his personal story about hope really striking. He said it wasn't seeing the number drop on the scale that felt like the biggest win. It was when I went to bed and didn't feel like I had to start over the next day. Just that feeling of being free from the constant battle.
Yeah, that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? And if he could give advice to himself, back on day one of his own journey, he said he'd tell himself, slow down. This isn't punishment, it's repair. Trust the process, but more importantly, stay in relationship with yourself while you do it, which just underscores again that the internal journey, the emotional repair, it's every bit as important as the physical changes.
So thinking about our listeners, if you're on a weight loss journey right now, especially if you're using semaglutide, maybe this deep dive is an invitation to shift your focus a little, to look beyond just the number on the scale and really consider this window of opportunity that the tool might be giving you.
Yeah, ask yourself those deeper questions. What am I truly hungry for? Now that food isn't automatically filling that space, what needs support? What needs attention? That question, it really can open the door to some profound self-discovery.
It's definitely not a miracle pill, but it sounds like it can absolutely be a miracle pause, a chance to reset, to realign.
For sure. And as Dan Hollis consistently reminds people, healing that emotional hunger piece, it takes empathy, not judgment, awareness, not rules, and curiosity, not punishment.
When the cravings stop, the truth begins.